today's video I'm going to show you how to take care of and preserve the wooden handles on your tools.
So I know many of you guys that are following the homesteading project have contacted me and told me about the finds that you've gotten from garage sales or flea markets on good American-made tools. You know, as we've talked about so many times before, it's hard to find good quality forged steel axes and hatchets, things that were made in America, things that were with good quality steel. Most of the stuff we find now are Mexico and Brazil and China, and they're absolutely rubbish. So I'm always hitting the garage sales and looking for finds. I'm looking for stuff that's got a America's Maker's Mark on it, true temper, like this good double-bitted axe right here, and restoring them. Oftentimes the handles that come with them are no good and need to be replaced, and they're overlooked, and you can usually buy these things for just $1 or a couple dollars, a good quality axe head like this that I got for a little bit of nothing, and just put my own handle on it. So once we get the handle put on, we do have to maintain it. If you maintain it and take care of it and nourish it, it will last a long, long time, and it's really a simple process, and you only need to do it really about once a year. The stuff we're going to need to refurbish the handle today is going to be some sandpaper, about 180, 200, even 300 grits fine, kind of a fine sandpaper, boiled linseed oil, which can be found at any hardware store. And we're going to finish up with some double super fine steel wool. This is about the finest stuff you can get, and then a shop rag. The thing I'm going to be working on today, and one of my finds at an estate sale, I think I got it for $1, is this Pulaski. A Pulaski is kind of a half axe, a half hatchet, or half mattox, or grub tool, some people will call it. This was invented by a guy in the Forest Service. His name was Pulaski, as for doing fire lines, and it's got kind of as you can see there, a rude axe and a grubber on the back, and it's intended to do fire line, so you can cut roots and then flip it over and grub out bushes and grass and vegetation. Hand crews, usually about 20 people or so, will work in a row. Each one of them will have a different tool, and they'll take a step and dig, take a step and do a dig, and by the time the last guy gets there, they actually have a very good fire line. And what they're trying to do is, as the fire creeps along on the ground, they're just making a fire break or a barrier where it runs into dirt with no vegetation and stops the fire. So this is one of the primary tools I used for that work. It's handy around the farm or the ranch. So as you can see, the handle is in really bad shape. We got some checking going on, which is this cracking, and it even has a big bow in it, and that happens from leaning tools against a wall. But we can fix that. I'll have this thing sitting on a concrete floor or on a hard surface, and I'll put about a 30-40 pound anvil on top of it and just let it sit on there. And after some weeks or months, it will eventually straighten out. I'll just keep an eye on it, but time is on my side. But the handle is really dry, so let's start the process of sanding this down, cleaning it up, treating it, and we'll go through all the steps.
We'll start with our 200 or 180 grit sandpaper, whatever we have around, and knock off the edges on this handle. Usually they're pretty smooth when you get them. If they have any varnish on them, if somebody has done that, or it's got a relatively new handle on it, get that varnish off there. That's no good. We don't want that. It's going to prevent the linseed oil from penetrating the wood, and it's going to give you blisters. I don't know why modern manufacturers have felt the need to put varnish on handles. Obviously they don't use their own products. I think it's just marketing, so they think it looks nicer and that appeals to people. But someone wrote me just the other day, said they'd bought a replacement handle for a Stihl brand. I don't know if it was a hatchet or an axe, and it came varnished, and that surprised me because I would think that they would know better. But with a little bit of work, that can be removed. So this was actually pretty smooth. So that feels like that would be fine. So boiled linseed oil, where that comes from is it's pressed out of flaxseed, I believe. And there's boiled linseed and there's non-boiled linseed. And how I understand the difference is the boiled linseed is treated in a way, I don't know if it's truly boiled or what the process is, but it causes it to dry much faster. So it's appropriate to use on hand tools like axes or things you're going to really handle, or decks, something that's going to be walked on. I know that some guys use it on their gun stocks. It does darken the wood, where boiled linseed oil will also work as a really good preservative. I think I've heard guys use it for old style wooden rain gutters, but the dry time on it is really, really slow. And I know that some painters add it to oil-based paint. And the slow drying is appealing to a lot of people, especially if you're going to do a finish, because it gives it time to level out. So if you run a brush with boiled linseed oil mixed in with your paint and you brush across something that's going to show, because it dries so slow, gravity will pull it, it'll level it down, and you just never get a finish that looks as nice as a slow drying oil finish. But I think that that's the main difference. Correct me if I'm wrong. But boiled linseed oil is what you want for hand tools, things that need to dry relatively quickly. So I just use these blue shop towels that you get at Costco. They're heavy duty and they hold up to a lot of abuse. And I do all my tools at one time. That way, because the linseed oil is kind of expensive. And that way when I get my rag all saturated, then I can use it on all the tools. But when you get a tool like this one right here that's so neglected, we can bring this back. And what this oil is going to do is it's going to nourish the wood, and it's going to really help reduce the drying and the shrinking. You know, wood is a natural, a living, well, it was a living material. And just like leather, the oils will be depleted out of it as it dries. And this is really going to help keep it moisturized. And if you don't abuse a handle and you keep it treated, you will it will last you a long, long time. You know, and if we get down to hard times, economic collapse, or the Second Great Depression or whatever, these tools are going to be the things that saved our life. We're going to be getting back to the basics, back to things the way things were. And so now's the time to acquire them and to really learn how to take care of them and to use them. By keeping them sharp, taking care of the handles so you don't get blisters, it really makes a big difference. I think a lot of guys probably had bad experience using axes and tools that weren't properly sharpened or taken care of, and you work your butt off and you think that they're ineffective, but they're not. They're just oftentimes not being used properly. I always liked the example of the typewriter. The first guy that I had a metal shop teacher in high school. His name was Mr. Ramsey, and he was quite a guy. And I remember he came in. He was very opinionated. He came in and was really upset. He was sputtering about watching Mickey Rooney, I think it was, on 60 Minutes go on a rant about how useless crescent wrenches were, or excuse me, channel locks were. And old Ramsey, he was mad as hell about that. And he said something that's always stuck with me. He said the reason why he's so frustrated with these channel locks is he doesn't know how to use them. Because anyone who really knows how to work with their hands, a tradesman, knows that channel locks are just an indispensable tool. He said, if I sat down, not being a writer like him, to a typewriter, never have using a typewriter, never have learned how to use it and learned the keys, I would think after a couple minutes that this was a useless tool and go back to my pen and paper. It would be much more efficient for me. But once you take the time to learn something, to learn how to use the typewriter and remember the keys, then it is a more efficient and a better way to write. And the same goes true with the channel locks. Had Mickey Rooney learned to use the tool, he wouldn't have made such an ignorant statement. I thought this was about wooden handles here. So I've got the first coat on. When you have a tool like this, it's really dry and starting to check. You're going to need to do this about, I would say, 4 to 5 times. And just do it maybe twice a day. Just keep putting it in there until when you look at it, you'll see that it's really not soaking in anymore, and it's starting to just puddle up and just stay on the handle. Once you do that, you know that you've got the tool all that it's going to take. So after you do that, we're going to use the steel wool. We're going to do what you call burnishing, and I'll bring you a close-up here. You can see here on my hatchet. This is a handle that's well used and well taken care of, apart from all the sap on there, but it just gives me extra traction. But you can see it's got a real high luster and a sheen. It's been well treated, taken care of, and no cracking, no checking, and smooth and shiny and almost polished to the touch. How you get that finish is with the steel wool. So after the linseed has had a good time, ability to dry, take your steel wool, the double-aught, and you're going to burnish the handle. And that's just sealing all that stuff in there. Polish it really nicely. It feels really good in the hand after this. When I worked for the Forest Service and the fire department that I worked for really took good care of their tools and handles. And it was always nice to grab a shovel or a hatchet or an axe or whatever, and it was always burnished and polished and well taken care of and nice. And you can also use the steel wool to polish the steel heads on your tools too and keep those clean. And what that will help is when you're cutting, if you get into green wood that has a lot of sap and pitch in it, it will really help to keep that stuff from adhering and make your work easier. You want to keep that free of all of that pitch and sap. It cuts down the effectiveness of the tool. So as you can see here, hopefully you can see how nice and smooth and shiny. That's a thing of beauty right there. Nice and burnished, and I love it. Love it. So that's essentially it. Whether it's a mattox or a shovel or garden tool or a hoe, the process is exactly the same. And I would, when you're looking for tools and such, I would probably stay away from the fiberglass handles. Those are really popular. I see a lot of them around now. What I always think with the wooden handles, whether it be a hammer or whatever, I can always make another handle for it. And a lot of the times the way that the plastic or fiberglass handles are set into the tool itself don't lend themselves very well to being replaced. And they will break. They'll work loose and break. Where the wooden handles, I can do something and I can effectively repair those. And so I think you should probably stick with the wooden handles. And before I close here, I want to go over we'll call it the quiver of tools that you should have if you're preparing or homesteading as far as cutting tools go. The first thing you need to have is a nice hatchet. There's two types of hatchets. There's going to be a thin cutting hatchet like this, and then there's going to be a splitting hatchet, which is going to be a lot wider. You can see here that this is a splitting axe. You see the taper on it? It has a real extreme angle on it. And what that is designed for is it's wedge-like, and it helps to split wood open. So for chopping kindling, depending on what type of wood you have, but if you have nice straight grain stuff like we do here, a regular hatchet is just fine for splitting kindling for starting a fire. If you have hardwoods, oaks, or that type of wood, you might want to go something with a little bit more taper in it. Next, you're going to want a proper axe, a falling axe, you might call it. There's two types. There's a double-bitted axe like this, and then there's a single-bitted axe. If you don't have a lot of experience swinging axes, or maybe you're smaller in stature or a woman, I would probably recommend not going with something like this because it can be really dangerous if you make a mistake. You have a lot of metal, you have two razor-sharp edges that are swinging, and they are not to be trifled with. They are a serious tool, and one mistake could end your life. So a regular axe with a flat end on it, it will work fine. If you're doing a lot of work, it's nice to have the double-bitted axe because you have two edges. But that you take your hatchet and your axe, those are tools you want to have. Next, I think most people are familiar with this, is a splitting maul. That's kind of been the standard for splitting wood. It's what's been sold to us. When you think about splitting wood, you think about a big, heavy splitting maul. But I'll tell you, from someone who's split a lot of wood, what is a lot more effective in our area, now I can't speak for you what type of wood you have, but in the Pacific Northwest, a splitting axe is far superior. It doesn't fatigue you as much because it's just not so heavy, and it penetrates deeper. This is so wide and so broad, sometimes you'll hit it into things and it'll just bounce off because it's just a big old clunky, clumsy tool. This is a lot more athletic. It has a nice wide taper in it. You can see it's heavy enough that you can swing with it and really split wood well. And these are difficult to find, so really keep your eyes open in garage sales and estate sales to see if you can find something like this. It'll have a big, about a 3-pound head on it, and maybe 2 pounds, but really wide. That's what you're looking for, is that taper. And a splitting axe will be flat on the end. And splitting axes and splitting mauls are different steel than falling axes. They are a softer steel, and you can pound on them. You can pound wedges. They're designed for that. Where if you have an axe that has a hard tempered steel, whether it's well, you're not going to pound wedges with a double, but let's say you had a single, those are not designed to hit metal. You do not want to pound wedges with them. They can fracture and chip. But splitting mauls are designed for it. And one other tool you're going to want, in addition to the splitting axe or splitting maul, or I really recommend you have both, is a metal wedge. Especially for you guys that have really gnarled oak. Yeah, that can be difficult to split. And a big heavy maul like this in combination with a wedge will usually get most of it broken apart. I don't have a wedge here to show you, but this wasn't to be a wedge or a splitting video. One interesting story I'll tell you about my grandfather on wedges and the quality of steel. He was a mechanic, a Ford mechanic for his whole life, and they used to have in the back of the shop a bunch of scrap metal, broken axles and whatever things that they'd repaired. They'd throw it out in the back to recycle it. And he said about once a month an old wood cutter would come by there in a beat up old truck, and he'd be rummaging through. He had permission to rummage through the scrap pile. And my granddad was out there one time talking to him, and he could notice that the wood splitter was setting axles aside in one pile and other axles in the other pile. And he asked him what he was doing, and he said, well, I only use Ford axles. And my granddad said, well, why don't you use why only Ford axles? Why not General Motors or Chrysler? He said the steel's no good. Now, this was a guy that pounded on them all the time, and if you pound on a wedge a lot, it will mushroom out, and you will truly find out, who makes the best steel. And this old wood splitter was old enough to, or wood cutter was smart enough to know that the steel on the GMs and the Chryslers would not hold up and was not good, but the steel made by the Ford Motor Company was far superior. So that just reassured my grandfather that Ford was the best, and he would never have owned anything else. So funny thing is, I don't really own anything else. So we're a Ford family too, and I don't want to start that whole can of worms. But just a funny story. That's all it is. So, all right. So thanks for watching, and let me know if you come across some good deals on tools, and if you'd like to replace a handle, you can watch the video. I'll put an annotation to here. I go in depth on how to replace an axe handle or splitting maul, and attach that video to me. Send it over and I'll attach it to the video, and I'd like to see what you guys came up with and how you're doing and what you're collecting and what you're finding. It'll be fun. So thanks again, and we'll see you on the next video. So you can see the tree is going now